Good afternoon. Welcome to another exciting edition of Reading with Mr. Eble. Still reading Grenade. We're going to be reading pages 102 to 114 today, so two more chapters. We'll start off with Hideki, and the chapter is called The Hole in the Wall. Hideki didn't know where his sister was now, but he knew the last place she'd been before the American monsters came, her high school. That was where he decided to start. The schoolhouse was still standing when he got there, but a big hole had blown in one side of it by an American bomb. Kimiko! Hideki cried. He dropped the sack with the Emperor's photographs and ran inside. What he saw made him gasp. Students lay dead all around Hideki. Some of them had been thrown across the room by the blast. Others were slumped over their desks. The bomb had hit while the students were in class. Hideki would have retched if he had anything left in his stomach. He wanted to run to get as far away from this horrible scene as he could, but Hideki had to know if any of the girls was his sister. He went up and down the rows of desks, examining each girl's face, but none of them was Kimiko. He was sure of it. Relief washed over him. It felt wrong to be happy his sister wasn't here when so many other girls hadn't been so lucky, but it meant there was a chance his sister was still alive somewhere. Kimiko had been one of the older girls at the school. Perhaps she had already been sent to her nursing assignment. But where? Hideki searched the room for clues. There were still lessons scratched on the board, the neat kanji starting in the upper right corner and moving down and left across the blackboard. A Japanese language lesson. On the wall beside the blackboard next to the hole the bomb had made was a framed photo of the school's faculty and students. The girls wore their best clothes, kimonos for some, fancy Western dresses for others, and their male teachers wore kimonos or jackets and ties. There's a brighter spot on the wall next to the photograph where another frame had hung but was now missing. A picture of His Majesty the Emperor, Hideki guessed. Someone had taken it, no doubt to try to protect the Emperor's moboi, but they had left the photo of the girls where it was. Hideki examined the papers scattered around the room. Most of them were pages of student work, but one was an official communication from Army headquarters. It ordered all fifth-year girls from the school to report to the Army hospital in Ichinichi-bashi. I think I said that right. Hi, Taryn Cole. Hideki's heart leaped. Kimiko was a fifth-year student. That must be where she was. But Ichinichi-bashi was a town on the southern part of the island, the same direction the American monsters were going. Hideki would have to get past them to find his sister. I can't do it, he thought. He remembered the disastrous first meeting of the Americans and the Blood and Iron Student Corps. He was frightened all over again. It would be so much easier to run north, to hide in the part of the island the Americans had already passed through. But it was his father's dying wish that Hideki find Kimiko to restore what was left of their family, and Hideki had promised he would. The hole in the wall of the school was like the lens of a camera, and through it Hideki saw Shuri Castle in the distance. Shuri Castle was a big four-story red building, the biggest in all of Okinawa, with a Chinese pagoda-style roof and ornate columns. Hideki thought of what Lieutenant Tanaka, the photographer, had said. What story did this picture tell? What had happened before this moment? What was happening now? What would happen next? What had come before Hideki had learned in school. For hundreds of years, Shuri Castle had been the royal palace of the Ryukyu Kingdom. Then the Japanese had invaded and conquered Okinawa in 1609. That faithful year, Shigetomo had cursed his clan forever with his cowardice. Now the Japanese army ruled the island from the caves and tunnels Hideki and his classmates had helped dig beneath Shuri Castle last year. The castle was a fortress, and so was Okinawa. That was the story Hideki saw, and it gave him hope that the Imperial Japanese army would win and might actually find his sister. What happened next? Hideki would step into the picture, head south toward Ichinichi-bashi and Kimiko. Shuri Castle was on the way, and if there was any place safe on the whole island, IJA headquarters had to be it. Hideki heard strange voices outside, and he froze. American soldiers, a whole platoon of them, coming into the village. His hand went to one of the grenades in his pocket, but just as quickly he let it go. He might be able to kill one or two soldiers, but the others would kill Hideki just as quick, and then he would never find his sister. He had to find somewhere to hide instead. Hideki heard a creak on the porch steps and threw himself into one of the empty desks. He flopped over the desktop and pretended to be dead. It wasn't hard. His uniform shirt and pants were so filthy they were unrecognizable, and his hair was matted and mangy. A buzzing fly crawled over his hands and face and up inside his cap. His cap! Hideki whipped it off his head and dropped it at his feet. He flopped back down on the desktop just seconds before the American soldier came in the room. Would the American see his cap? Would Hideki have to kill him with his grenade after all? Hideki kept his eyes screwed shut and held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Heavy Boots shuffled a few steps into the room and then stopped. Had the soldier spotted him? Was he aiming his rifle at Hideki right now? Hideki waited, his lungs burning, sweat soaking his back. When Hideki didn't hear anything more for almost a full minute, he pried his eyes open to take a peek. There he was, an American soldier. Not much older than he was, Hideki realized with a start. He didn't even have a beard. His face was round and freckled. He wore a big green and brown poncho over his backpack, and a matching helmet on his head, both of which made him look more like a turtle man than a soldier. He was wet and mucky, just like Hideki, and he dripped water on the dry floor. The soldier hadn't spotted Hideki. He was looking instead at the framed picture of the students and the faculty. What in the world did he want with that? The soldier stared at it for a few seconds more, then took the photograph out of its frame. The soldier folded the picture in half and put it in a pocket under his poncho. But why? Hideki wondered. Does the soldier know one of the girls in the photograph? Was he tracking one of them down? Is there something special about this school? Ray? A man called from outside. He asked a question in English that Hideki didn't understand, and then called the soldier's name again. Ray? The soldier in the room with Hideki called back, and Hideki squeezed his eyes shut and played dead as the soldier picked up his rifle and left. Hideki didn't breathe again until the soldier was long gone. All right, next chapter. It's about Ray, and it's called Deceased. We'll see. Ray looked at the picture he'd taken from the schoolroom as he and his platoon continued their march south. The strangest thing about the photo was that no one was smiling. It was like they all knew they were going to end up dead in that classroom. Ray wondered if the soldiers on the battleships would still have fired if they knew they were killing schoolchildren, whole villages of innocent people. But he had done that, so why should the sailors be any different? Big John put an arm around Ray's neck and gave him a playful headlock. Still a softy after all this time, huh, Barbecue? Ray tried to smile. Big John liked to talk tough, and he was tough. But Big John did have a heart inside that big barrel chest of his. Ray was sure of it. Had just been hardened over by combat. Ray had learned to hate the Japanese as much as Big John, and the other old-timers did, but he still held out hope Big John would start to see the Okinawans differently. The big guns of the U.S. Navy fleet offshore erupted like thunder, and Ray and Big John froze. The battleships kept up a constant bombardment on the southern part of the island all day, and like the rain, everybody had just gotten used to it by now. But this was something new. It's different this time, Ray said. He was surprised to find he'd been around long enough to realize it. I hear 16-inch, 5-inch anti-aircraft rockets. They're shooting everything at once. Big John nodded. What is it? What's happening? Zimmer asked. It has to be a Jap counterattack. Big one, Big John said. They all waited while Gonzalez radioed in. He blinked in surprise when he finally got through and learned what it was. They're celebrating, he told them. Germany surrendered. Hitler committed suicide. The Nazis are through. Ray felt himself go slack. He knew he should be happy about the news. The war in Europe had been going on for 6 long years, and had cost the lives of millions of people, soldiers and civilians alike. And he was glad it was over, for the sake of all the people who were still fighting it. But it didn't change anything for Ray or his squad. Looking around at the rest of the Marines, he could see that most of them felt the same way. But that's great, isn't it? Zimmer asked, seeing all the gloomy faces around him. He hadn't been on Okinawa long enough to understand. It's good and all, Big John said, but Nazi Germany might as well be on the moon for all it matters to us. Another sergeant brought a sack of mail up through the lines, and everyone gathered around to see if they had gotten a letter from home. Ray had a letter from his mother. It's mostly about planting the new corn crop back on the farm in Nebraska, and what his young cousins were up to. But she had included a photograph too. It was a picture of Ray and his father at the state fair, mugging for the camera in silly pirate costumes. Ray had an eye patch and a fake beard and an old-fashioned flintlock pistol, and Pa wore a bandana and brandished a wooden cutlass. They were laughing and leaning into each other, loving father and son. Ray figured his mother had sent him the picture to remind him that his father wasn't a terrible person, and for a moment it worked. Ray smiled to himself at the memory of that day. He got homesick all over again. But then Ray remembered a night not long after the one at the fair, when his father had stormed drunk from the house, leaving broken furniture in his wake. Ma had begged Ray not to judge his father too harshly. He's not the man I married, she told Ray. He was different before the war. They were both different now, Ray and his father, but they were still the happy people. But they were still the happy people in the photograph too, weren't they? Could they be both at once? What'd you get, Busco? Gonzalez asked one of the other Marines. Letter from my sweetheart, Sarah, Busco beamed. She's training to be a teacher back in North Carolina. Met her on Atlantic Beach when I was down there training at Camp Lejeune. Going to move in with her parents when you get back? Zimmer kidded him. Hope not. Her daddy runs a funeral home. Hey, get this, Zimmer said. He held up a piece of paper. I got a letter from the Missouri Department of Transportation. They say if I don't pay off my traffic tickets, they're going to arrest me. That got a lot of laughs. Now that I'd like to see, Ray said. You ought to let him do it, said Big John. Even jail'll be better than this summer-loving rain. As they got closer to the front lines, they passed exhausted soldiers heading north for a break. They're bloody and bandaged and muddy. They stumbled along, dog-tired, their heads down and eyes on the ground. On the rare occasion that one of them looked up, Ray saw that 1,000-yard stare. They looked like ghosts. Ray felt like a lead weight grow heavier in his stomach. It got harder and harder to pick up his feet and move forward. One of the ghosts glanced at Ray for a second as they passed. Take plenty of grenades with you down there, Marine, he said. Farther on, Ray saw the evidence of the hard-fought battle alongside the muddy road. Empty ammo boxes, spent rifle clips, bloody bandages, bullet-riddled jackets and trousers. The American dead had already been removed, but there were dead Japanese everywhere. Ray winced, and he had to look away. Ray was a hunter. He had killed deer and stripped their skins. This was different. It was unnatural, brutal. After seeing these horrible, broken bodies, Ray wasn't sure he could ever hunt again. Just like Pa, Ray realized. It had always been Ray's uncle who took him hunting. A sudden thought struck Ray. Was this why his Pa had argued so strongly against him enlisting? Had his father actually been trying to protect Ray from becoming the monster he'd become? Mortar shells exploded along the road, and Ray and his squad dove face down into the muck. Mud and rock geysered up around them, and the earth shook with the thunder of artillery. The Japanese were shooting at them in the daylight? This never happened up north. Into the foxholes, Big John bellowed. They leapt into trenches that had been dug and redug a dozen times since Love Day a month ago. Ray held onto his helmet while the mortars fell all around them with the rain. Zimmer, let me see the letter you got from the Missouri DOT, Big John hollered. Zimmer didn't understand, neither did anyone else, but he handed it over anyway. Big John took a greased pencil out of his pocket and scrawled the word deceased across the envelope in big block letters. There you go, Big John said. Now you can send that back to them in advance. They won't bother you no more. So we'll stop there. If you missed any of the previous part of the book, we'll post it up on our YouTube channel. But we'll keep on reading this every day this week at 12 o'clock. We'll keep on reading next week as well until we finish up the book. So students, keep working hard. It's your last week of school. Keep taking care of each other. Most importantly, I hope you all are staying safe. And remember, range is the way.